Snow hammered the ambulance bay doors of Summit Ridge like buckshot, and the only sound louder than the storm was a 4-star general roaring for a cardiothoracic surgeon who was 90 minutes up a closed mountain highway. His son was drowning in his own chest on the table, and the man screaming for a surgical team would not so much as look at the trauma nurse already cutting the boy's shirt away. Then she gave one order, flat and quiet and unbreakable, and the general went rigid because he had heard that exact voice once before years ago over the roar of a burning fire base in Helmand from the woman he had spent 5 years trying to bury. Trauma 1 at Summit Ridge Medical Center was built to hold chaos, and tonight it was failing. The overhead monitors screamed in overlapping tones. Warm blood pooled under the gurney and crept toward the drain in the center of the floor. Outside, a February blizzard had swallowed Denver whole, burying the interstate and grounding every helicopter in the state, and the wind drove snow sideways, past the glass, so hard it sounded like gravel thrown by the handful. On the table lay Captain Eli Whitlock, 26 years old, an Army Ranger who 11 hours earlier had been walking through a breaching drill at a training site in the foothills. A reinforced wall had come down wrong. Half a ton of concrete had folded his chest like a soda can. He had been carried out, driven down through the storm when no bird could fly, and now his left chest rose in a strange stove, in flutter with every breath, the ribs moving the wrong direction, sucking in where they should push out. Beside the gurney, gripping a clipboard he had forgotten he was holding, stood a first-year resident named Dev Okafor. His hands were shaking. 3 weeks ago, Dev had frozen during a code had stood over a dying man and simply stopped moving, and he had not slept a full night since. He was staring at the flail segment of Eli's chest, and he was doing it again, going pale, and still his own breath locking in his throat. General Marcus Whitlock filled the corner of the room, the way a storm front fills a sky. 4 stars sat on each shoulder of his coat. His face was carved granite, and his voice came out in a bellow that rattled the supply cabinet. "Where is your surgeon?" he demanded. "I was told this hospital had a trauma surgery chief. I want ramen. I want a cardiothoracic team in this room in the next 60 seconds, or I will have every one of you brought up on charges." Dev's mouth opened and nothing came out. The general took a step, and the boy on the table chose that moment to buck against the restraints, his oxygen number falling off a cliff. 88. 80. 76. The alarm went from urgent to frantic. "Sir." Dev finally managed. "Dr. Rahman is on the highway. I-70 is closed. An avalanche came down over the westbound lanes near the tunnel. She is trying to get through, but it could be an hour more. We do not." "An hour." The word came out of the general like a blade. "My son does not have an hour." The pneumatic doors hissed, and a woman came through them. She did not run. She crossed the room at a walking pace that ate the distance anyway, pulling gloves on as she came, and her eyes swept the bay in one pass, reading the monitors, the blood on the floor, the flutter of the ruined chest, the frozen resident, the raging general, all of it filed and sorted before she reached the rail of the gurney. This was Cora Bishop, the charge nurse of the trauma service, 12 years on this floor, and something harder than that behind her. She wore dark scrubs and a long-sleeved shirt beneath them, even in the heat of the room, the cuffs pulled down to her wrists. She set 2 fingers against Eli's neck, watched his chest, and spoke without raising her voice at all. "He has a tension building on the left. Trachea is shifting. Neck veins are up. I need a decompression now, and I need the massive transfusion protocol running before I finish this sentence." She looked at Dev. "Dev, 14-gauge second space handed to me. Now." Dev did not move. His eyes were glass. Cora did not repeat herself. She reached across him, took the angiocath from the tray herself, found the landmark by feel below the collarbone, and drove the needle home. A hiss of trapped air escaped long and ugly. Eli's oxygen number caught, wavered, and began to climb. 80, 84, 89. The general stared at her. "Get your hands off my son," he said. "I asked for the best surgeon in this state. I did not ask for a nurse." Cora was already moving to the next thing. "Dr. Rahman is buried under an avalanche of her own right now, General. So tonight I am the wall standing between your son and the morgue, and the wall does not have time to argue with you." She glanced at the tech beside her. "Chest tube tray open. I want a thoracostomy on the left. And someone get me a working phone line to Rahman patch her audio into this room." "You will not cut him," the general said. "He is already cut," Cora said. "The training accident did that. I am just deciding whether he keeps bleeding into a closed box or whether we give the blood somewhere to go." She looked up at last and met his eyes across the table, and for 1 second, the room narrowed to the two of them. The general's face changed. It was not the words that did it. It was the voice, that low, even tone with no fear in it at all. A voice that gave orders in the middle of a screaming room the way other people breathe. He had heard it before. He was suddenly certain he had heard it before, and the certainty crawled up his spine like cold water. The monitors filled the silence. Eli's blood pressure was low and getting lower. The flutter in his chest had not stopped. Cora broke the moment first. She turned to Dev and put a hand flat on his shoulder, firm, grounding the way you would steady a horse. "Dev, look at me, not at him. You are not going to freeze on me tonight. I need you holding pressure on that groin line, and I need you counting his breaths out loud so I can hear the number while my hands are busy. That is the whole job, just the number. Can you give me the number?" Something in the resident's chest unlocked. He swallowed. 26, he said, thin but audible. 28. Good. Keep going. She was already gloving deeper, calling for the blade. And as she reached across the tray, her sleeve pulled back an inch at the wrist, and something showed there, a ridge of old scar tissue, pale and ropey, the mark of a burn that had healed a long time ago. She tugged the cuff down again, without seeming to notice she had done it, a motion worn smooth by 10,000 repetitions. The general saw the scar. He did not know yet why it mattered, but the cold water was climbing higher. "What is your name?" he said. Cora did not look up from the incision she was beginning to plan. "Bishop," she said. "Now be quiet, or step into the hall, General, because the next 90 seconds belong to your son, and I do not have a single one of them to spend on your rank." Somewhere under her scrub top, tucked in a breast pocket, she had carried it in for 5 years without ever quite deciding to throw it away. A small, heavy disc of scorched brass pressed against her chest, and for just an instant, as the general said the word, "Bishop," out loud, and went white, her free hand drifted up and touched it through the fabric, the way you touch a healed wound, to make sure it is still only a scar. Then Eli's monitor shrieked again, and there was no more time for the past. The oxygen number that Cora had bought with the needle was already leaking away. She watched it slide 90, 87, 83, and she did not need the machine to tell her the story. She could see it in the boy's lips going the color of a bruise, and in the way his good side was working twice as hard to make up for the side that had quit. "He is reaccumulating," she said. "The decompression bought us minutes, not the fight. Chest tube left side now. Dev, keep counting." 22, Dev said. "He is slowing down. 20, 19. That is the blood, not the calm. Do not let the number fool you." Cora prepped the flank with a amber sweep of antiseptic, found the space between the ribs with her fingertips, and made the small, firm cut. She pushed a gloved finger through the muscle and into the chest cavity, sweeping feeling. And the moment she broke through, a dark rush came up around her finger and ran down over her wrist, warm even through the glove. Not the clean gush of air she wanted. Blood. Too much of it. He is not just leaking air, she said half to herself. He is filling the chest. This is a hemothorax on top of the tension. He took something into a vessel when that wall came down. Behind her, General Whitlock had gone very still, and stillness on that man was worse than shouting. He was looking at the ridge of scar that had shown at her wrist, and he was looking at the flat certainty of her hands, and the thing that had been climbing his spine since she walked in had reached the base of his skull. "Bishop," he said again, quietly this time, testing it. "You were in the army." Cora did not answer. She had a tube to seat and a lung to reinflate, and she seated it, threading the chest tube up along the inside of the ribs, and blood surged down the tubing into the collection chamber and kept coming, filling the first marked line and reaching for the second. "That is a lot of output," Dev said, his voice climbing. "I know exactly how much it is," Cora said. "Watch the rate, not the volume. If it slows, the vessel is small, and it will clot. If it stays like this—" She did not finish. It was not slowing. The speaker on the wall crackled, and a woman's voice came through, roughened by a bad connection and the howl of wind on the other end. "This is Raman. Who am I talking to, and what have I got?" "Priya, it is Cora." She did not stop working. 26-year-old male crush injury to the chest from a structure collapse flail segment on the left. Tension pneumo that I have decompressed. Now a hemothorax that is not slowing. 1,400 out of the tube in the first 2 minutes, and it is still running. Pressure is 70/40 and soft. He's on his second unit, and I have the protocol wide open. There was a pause full of static and engine noise. 1,400 and still running, Raman repeated. "That is a great vessel, or the heart itself. Where am I?" "I am stopped dead behind a snowplow on the wrong side of the tunnel. They are telling me 40 minutes to clear one lane." "Cora, he does not have 40 minutes. "No," Cora said. "He does not. Get your surgeon here," the general said to the room, to the ceiling, to no one. "Get her a police escort. Get her a snowcat. I do not care what it takes." "General." Raman's voice came back tight and clear over the speaker. "There is a mountain of snow between me and your son, and no machine on this earth is moving it in the time we have. So I need you to be quiet, and let me listen to the person who is actually in the room." A beat. "Cora, talk to me about the heart." Cora had already moved to the head of the bed. She put the ultrasound probe to the boy's chest below the sternum and tilted it up, and the grainy gray picture bloomed on the little screen, and she read it the way other people read a headline. "There is fluid around the heart," she said. "The sac is filling. The right side is starting to collapse when it should be relaxing. Priya, this is early tamponade layered on top of everything else. The crush drove something into the pericardium. On the screen, the small, dark crescent of blood around the heart was not small anymore. The general made a sound she had not expected low, and wrecked a sound that did not belong to 4 stars. He had put his hand on the rail of the gurney, and he was gripping it hard enough to whiten his knuckles, and he was looking at his son's gray face, and the commander was cracking off him like ice off a wing. Cora saw it. She had seen 100 versions of it. Fathers, mothers, husbands, the moment the rank or the money or the pride stopped mattering, and there was only the body on the table and the terrible arithmetic of it. She did not soften exactly. She did not have the room for soft. But her voice, when she spoke to him next, dropped the edge. "General, listen to me. I am not going to lie to you, and I am not going to waste your time, so hear this once. Your son is bleeding into the bag around his heart, and the bag is squeezing the heart until it cannot fill. If nothing changes, that heart stops, and soon. There is exactly one thing that fixes it in this room in the next few minutes, and it is not a thing that happens up a closed highway. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The general looked at her. For a moment, the whole storm outside seemed to hold its breath. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that the only person who can save my son is the one I told to get her hands off him." "I'm telling you the truth about your son," Cora said. "The rest of it is yours to sort out later." Her hand had drifted up again unconscious and pressed flat over the pocket where the scorched coin lay against her breastbone. She caught herself doing it, and let the hand fall, and turned back to the boy. And behind the flat mask of her focus, something old moved in her. A heat she had spent 5 years keeping banked, because she knew this man. She had known it the second she looked across the table. She had known it in the way he filled a room and the way he gave orders to walls and weather. She had knelt in front of this man once in a place that stank of burning fuel and cooking meat with his brother's blood up to her elbows, and she had told him no, and he had never forgiven her for it, and he did not know yet that he was about to owe her everything. "Priya," Cora said to the speaker, "start walking me through it, because I don't think we are going to be able to wait for you." There was a silence on the line long enough that Cora thought the connection had dropped. Then Raman said, "Walk you through what, Cora?" "You know what," Cora said. On the monitor, the boy's pressure fell another notch, and the number where his heart lived began very slightly to slow. "Walk you through a thoracotomy," Raman said, and the words landed in the room like a dropped tray. "That is what you are asking me, in a trauma bay, by a nurse. You want me to talk you through cracking that boy's chest." "I want you to tell me we still have another option first," Cora said. "And then I want you to tell me the truth when there is not one. Static. Wind. The distant grinding of a snowplow somewhere on the far side of a buried tunnel. Then Raman quieter. Keep transfusing. Keep the pressure up any way you can. Give me 2 minutes to get to a clear spot where I can hear you. Do not do anything yet." "Copy," Cora said, and for the space of those 2 minutes, she did the small, relentless work of keeping a dying man from dying faster, and the general watched her do it, and the past came up around him whether he wanted it or not. He was not in Denver anymore. He was in Helmand, and it was 2018, and the world was on fire. The forward operating base had taken a hit on the fuel and ammunition point just after dark, a single lucky rocket into exactly the wrong stack of drums, and the whole southern quarter of the base had gone up in a wall of flame that lit the desert orange for a mile. Whitlock had been a colonel, then a brigade commander, and he had run toward the burning instead of away from it, because that was the only direction he knew. The aid station had become a slaughter yard. Burned men. Men full of shrapnel. Young soldiers screaming for their mothers with the skin coming off their arms in sheets. The surgeon assigned to that base had been killed in the first blast, and the highest medical authority left standing in the smoke had been a lieutenant, an Army trauma nurse with a field surgical background, working 2 casualties at once, with her sleeves already scorched black. Her name had been Bishop. The soldiers called her Kestrel on the radio. That night, coated in ash and other people's blood, she had looked like something the fire had made. They had carried his brother in at the worst possible moment. Master Sergeant Daniel Whitlock, Duke to everyone who loved him, a Special Forces senior medic, the best man Marcus had ever known, and the only family he had left. Duke had been near the ammunition point when it went, and the blast had opened his belly and burned him down one whole side, and even through the ruin of him, Marcus had known the wounds were bad, in the way that has only one ending. But Marcus had not been able to accept it. He had grabbed the lieutenant by the arm hard enough to bruise, and he had ordered her screamed it into her ash-streaked face to save his brother. Use everything. Use all of it. That is a direct order. And she had looked at him. This lieutenant a third his rank, with 6 young soldiers bleeding out on the cots around them, and 3 units of blood left in the whole station. And she had said, no. She had turned away from Duke, and she had spent the blood and the hours and her own 2 hands on the young ones, the 19 and 20-year-olds, and one by one, she had dragged them back from the edge. And Duke had bled out on a cot in the corner while she did it. Marcus had held his brother's hand at the end and watched the light go out of him, and across the tent, the lieutenant had been elbow deep in a private's chest, saving a boy whose name Marcus never learned, and he had hated her with a purity that had lasted 5 years. He had tried to end her. He had pushed for a court-martial for disobeying a lawful order. The Army had convened its review, examined the triage protocols, and instead of punishing her, had quietly written her up for saving 6 lives under impossible conditions. There had been talk of a decoration. Disgusted, gutted, certain she had murdered his brother with a clipboard, and a cold heart, Marcus had used every ounce of his rank to make sure that decoration died in committee, and that her name carried a shadow into every posting she ever tried to take. A year later, she had resigned her commission and vanished into the civilian world, and he had told himself that was justice. Now she was standing over his son with her hands inside him, and she was the only thing in the state that could save the boy. General. He came back to the room. Cora was looking at him. The speaker on the wall was silent. Ramen gathered somewhere on the far side of it, and for one moment it was just the two of them again, the way it had been in the tent. "I know who you are," Marcus said. His voice had gone hoarse. "You are the one from the FOB. Kestrel. You let Duke die." "I know who you are too, Colonel," Cora said. She used the old rank without meaning to, and neither of them corrected it. "I have known since you started giving orders to the weather." "You let my brother die," Marcus said again, and now there was a shake in it, grief wearing the mask of rage the way it always did with men like him. "You had blood. You had your hands. You chose a tent full of strangers over the best man I ever—" "I did not choose," Cora said. She said it very quietly, and it stopped him, because it was not the answer he had built his hatred around for 5 years. He had a whole architecture of blame, and she had just put her hand against a load-bearing wall of it. "What did you say?" he said. But the boy on the table chose that moment to arrest half a beat, a stutter in the rhythm, the pressure gone soft as wet paper, and Cora's head snapped back to the monitor, and the pass dropped away like a stone down a well. "He is crashing," she said. "Priya, are you there? He is crashing. The tamponade is winning. I am out of minutes." The speaker came alive. "I am here. Cora, listen to me very carefully, because I am only going to be able to say this once, and then you are going to have to do it with your own 2 hands. "Say it," Cora said, and her hand, without her willing it, rose one last time and pressed flat over the scorched brass coin above her heart. The coin a dying man had folded into her fingers in a burning tent and made her promise to carry, and she thought, not now. Duke, not yet. And she reached for the blade. "There is no more waiting for me," Ramen said, each word carved clean through the static. "You have looked at that heart with your own eyes. The sack is full, and it is choking him, and it will not empty on its own. You know what that means. There is one procedure that opens the box and takes the pressure off the heart, and it has to happen where the patient is, which is under your hands, not mine. I am going to walk you through every step, but I need to hear you say, you understand what I'm asking." Cora's eyes were on the boy, tracking the flutter of his pulse in his neck, the way his color was going from bruise to clay. "I understand," she said. "You are asking me to do a resuscitative thoracotomy. Open the chest, open the sac, get the heart out from under the pressure, and hold whatever is torn until you get here." "Yes," Raman said. "That is exactly what I'm asking, and I need you to understand the other part too. You are a nurse. This is a surgeon's procedure. If you do this and he lives, there will be a room full of people asking why a nurse had her hands around a beating heart. If you do this and he dies, that room gets a lot uglier. I am authorizing it on my license in front of witnesses, because the alternative is that he dies in the next 3 minutes, while both of us listen. But I cannot make the choice for the hands. The hands are yours." Cora had gone very still, the kind of still that is not hesitation, but the opposite a gathering. The general found his voice. "No." He came off the rail toward her. "You are not going to open my son's chest. You are a nurse. You already let one Whitlock die on a table. I will not stand here and let you, General." Cora did not raise her voice, but something came into it that stopped him mid-stride, a cold, clear authority that had commanded a burning aid station and never once flinched. "Look at the monitor." He looked. The blue line is his oxygen. The red line is the pressure his heart is fighting to make. "Watch them. Do not watch me, watch them." Her hands were already moving, sweeping antiseptic across the boy's chest, in a wide amber arc, but her eyes stayed on the general's. In a little under 2 minutes, that red line goes flat, and when a heart stops, from this squeezed empty by its own blood, it does not start again. Not with drugs, not with paddles, not with prayer. It is a mechanical problem, and it needs a mechanical fix, and the fix has to happen before the line goes flat, not after. "You are asking me to let you cut him open on a hunch." "I am not asking you for anything," Cora said. "I am telling you what is true. You can spend the next 2 minutes stopping me. You can put your hands on me. You can call me a butcher. You can promise to end my life the way you tried to end it once already. That is your right, and I cannot stop you. But if you take my hands off your son right now, you will be flying his body home this week, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing you had a chance, and you spent it shouting." Marcus Whitlock stood over his son with his fists clenched and his whole body shaking, and the storm outside threw itself against the glass, and somewhere very far down, under the 4 stars and the 5 years of hate, there was a man who had already buried one person he loved because he could not accept the truth fast enough. His hands opened. He stepped back and hit a rolling stool with the back of his knees, and sat down hard, and he put his face in his hands, and when he spoke, his voice came out of him in pieces. "Do it," he said. "Please, save my boy. Do it." Cora was already turning. "Dev." The resident flinched, but he did not freeze. Something had changed in him over the last 20 minutes, watching this woman work, being given one small, holdable job at a time, until his hands remembered they were his. "I need you," Cora said, "and I need you present, not perfect. You are going to hand me instruments as I call them, and you are going to keep your eyes on his pressure, and you are going to tell me the number every 15 seconds, whether it is good or bad. If you feel yourself going away, you plant your feet, and you say the number out loud, because the number is a rope, and you hold on to it. Are you with me?" Dev's jaw worked, then thin but real. "I am with you, Priya," Cora said to the speaker. "I have prep on the chest. I have a blade. I have a resident on instruments and pressure, and I have consent from next of kin in the room. Talk me in. Left side, left anterolateral." Raman said, her voice suddenly smooth, and even the wind on her end fallen away. All of her poured into the line. "You know the landmark. Follow the space below the nipple curve up toward the armpit. One confident stroke through skin and muscle down to the ribs. Do not saw at it. One stroke. Tell me when you are at the ribs." Cora set the blade against the boy's skin. Her hand did not shake. Behind her, the general lifted his face out of his hands to watch, because he could not watch. And across the bay, the monitors counted down the seconds of his son's life in soft electronic tones, and Cora Bishop took a slow breath and let it half out and pressed down. "Starting now," she said. The blade opened him in one long, clean line skin, then the yellow layer beneath, Then the dark red muscle and blood welled up along the incision, and Dev caught it with a fistful of gauze without being told, and Cora did not look up. "I'm at the ribs," she said. "Good," Raman said. "Now you make your way between them into the space. You need room to see and room to work, so you are going to spread those ribs wide. The retractor. Seat it. Crank it, do not be gentle. The boy will forgive you the cartilage if you give his heart back to him." "Rib spreader," Cora said, and Dev put the heavy steel instrument into her palm, cold and serious, and she worked the teeth of it between the ribs and turned the crank. The chest opened with a sound that made the resident go pale again, a deep, wet crackling as the cartilage gave, but Dev planted his feet and said the number. "Pressure 50/30, 50. Copy 50, Cora said. The chest was open now, a red cavern, and she looked into it with a trauma surgeon's map behind her eyes, even though she had never carried the title. There was blood everywhere, welling and pooling, and beneath it half drowned the pale, straining bag around the heart. "I have the pericardium," she said. "It is tight as a drum. It is bulging. This is the tamponade pria. The sac is packed full, and the heart underneath it is barely twitching." "Then open the sac," Raman said. "This is the moment. You take the sac between forceps, you lift it away from the heart, so you do not nick the muscle, and you open it lengthwise in front of the phrenic nerve. Well clear of it. The blood is going to come out fast, and it is going to come out ugly. Let it. That gush is the pressure leaving. That gush is your patient coming back. Tell me when you are through it." Cora lifted the tense membrane with forceps, tented it up away from the struggling muscle beneath, and made a careful opening along its length, and the moment she was through, a torrent of dark, clotted blood erupted out of the sac and poured over her hands and down into the cavity and off the edge of the table onto the floor, and Dev made a sound, and the general half rose from his stool. And then the heart, freed from the fist that had been crushing it, gave one enormous shuddering beat, then another. Then it began to pump ragged and desperate and alive, and on the monitor the flat, soft line where the pressure lived twitched, caught, and started to climb. "The sac is open," Cora said. "It is beating. Priya, it is beating on its own. The tamponade is off. Pressure is coming up. 70, 75. "Yes," Raman breathed. "Yes, that is it. Now, do not celebrate because something tore to fill that sac, and it is still torn. Put your eyes on the heart. Find the wound. The crush drove a rib end or a fragment into it, and now that the sac is open, it is going to start bleeding into the open chest instead. You have to find it, and you have to hold it. Where is the blood coming from?" Cora leaned in her hands, cradling the beating muscle, and she found it a ragged laceration on the front of the right side of the heart, the thin-walled chamber welling with every beat. "Right ventricle," she said. "Anterior. It is a tear maybe 2 centimeters, and it is bleeding with every contraction." "Of course it is the ventricle," Raman said grimly. "All right. Listen to me. You cannot clamp a heart, it has to keep beating. So you are going to control that hole with your finger right now. Direct pressure, 1 fingertip over the tear. Gentle but firm, let the muscle beat under you. Do it now, and tell me you have it." Cora laid the pad of 1 gloved finger over the tear and pressed, feeling the heart clench and release beneath her hand, feeling the terrible intimacy of it, the boy's whole life running through the muscle under her fingertip, and the bleeding slowed to a seep. "I have it," she said. "I have a finger on it. But Priya, I cannot hold this for 40 minutes, and I cannot suture it one-handed while it is beating, and if I lift off, it bleeds." "No," Raman said. "You cannot hold it forever, and I am not going to make it in time to do this cleanly, so we are going to buy time. Here is what we do. The general was on his feet, now drawn to the rail against every instinct, staring down into his son's open chest at the nurse's single finger, holding the boy's heart together. And his face was wet, and he did not know it. "There is a trick," Raman said, "and it is ugly, and it is temporary, and it is exactly what the field taught people like you to do when there was no surgeon and no time. You are going to bridge that hole. Not close it. Bridge it just enough to take your finger off and keep the blood in until I can get there and do it right. Dev is going to help you, and you are going to do it slow. And I am going to be in your ear for every second of it. Are you ready?" Cora looked at the boy's heart beating under her finger. She looked for just a second at the general's ruined face across the table. Then she looked at Dev, who had not run, who was standing there white and steady with his eyes on the monitor and the number ready in his mouth. "I have done this before," Cora said quietly, and it was not to Raman, and it was not quite to the room. "In a worse place than this with less than this. Dev, stay with me. We are going to keep this boy's heart in his chest." "Number is 80, Dev said, and his voice did not shake. 82. He is climbing." "Then let us go," Cora said. "Talk me and Priya. Every step." What Cora did over the next 11 minutes, the general would never fully be able to describe afterward, though he would try in the quiet of his own house for the rest of his life. She worked with one finger holding a beating heart, and the other hand doing everything else, and Raman's voice threaded through it all, and Dev fed her what she called for, and never once looked away. She had Dev prepare a soft catheter, the kind meant for a bladder, and under Raman's guidance, she used it the way the field had taught her, easing it into the wound just far enough, letting its small balloon swell inside the chamber and settle back against the tear from the inside, so that the heart's own wall pressed the hole closed against it. It was not elegant. It was not in any civilian textbook. It was the kind of thing you learned in a place where elegance got people killed, and the only rule was keep the blood inside the body. "Gentle traction," Raman said in her ear. "Just enough to seat it against the wall, not a millimeter more, or you tear it wider. Tell me the bleeding." "Slowing," Cora said. Her voice was flat with concentration, her forearms trembling now with the fine fatigue of holding a living thing still. "It is slowing. The balloon is seating. I can feel it catch each time he beats. Now you take your finger off, slowly. If it holds, you have your bridge." Cora lifted her fingertip off the heart a fraction at a time, ready to clamp back down. The catheter held. The tear stayed closed against the swell of it. The heart beat on ragged, but full filling and emptying the way a heart is supposed to. "It is holding," Cora said, and for the first time all night, something moved in her voice, not relief exactly, but the shadow of it. "Priya, the bridge is holding. He has a pressure, he has a rhythm. It is ugly, and it is temporary, and it is holding. Then you keep it holding until I get through that tunnel," Raman said, and there was something wet in her voice now too. "You did it. You kept a hand on that boy's heart in a trauma bay, in a blizzard kestrel. You keep it holding." The old call sign came through the speaker, and the general made a sound, low, like a man taking a blow. The doors banged open 8 minutes later. Priya Raman came through them, still in her snow-soaked coat, having abandoned her car at the mouth of the cleared lane and run the last half-mile through the storm, and she took in the room in a single sweep, a nurse standing over an open chest with her hand still steadying the boy's heart, a resident white as paper, but rock steady beside her, a 4-star general gripping the rail with tears frozen on his face. She was gowned and gloved in 90 seconds. "Talk to me," she said, stepping up to the table, her eyes going into the cavity, tracking the crude, brilliant bridge Cora had built. God, You actually seated a balloon against a right ventricular tear with your bare hands in the fieldway. If that had slipped by a hair, we would have lost him in 10 seconds. It did not slip, Cora said. No, Raman said softly, looking at the steady work of it. It did not. She took the needle driver that Tech placed in her palm and leaned into the chest. All right. You are going to ease off your bridge on my count and give me the wound, and I am going to close it for good. Nurse Bishop, on 3 you deflate and draw, I sew. 1, 2, 3. Cora eased the bridge back, and Raman's hands moved into the space with the blurred certainty of 20 years laying the sutures across the tear, one bite, another, drawing the ragged edges of the right ventricle together while the heart beat under her needle and never stopped, and Dev called the numbers, and the general watched the 2 women he had underestimated hold his son inside the world with their 4 hands. Last bite, Raman said. Tying, and the tear is closed, releasing. She sat back a fraction. It is holding on its own. The repair is holding. His pressure, 95/60. Dev said, and his voice cracked in the middle of it, the first crack he had allowed himself all night. 95. He is stable. He is stable. He is viable, Raman said. Let us get him upstairs. I want to wash out this chest plate, those ribs, and close him properly in an OR. But the emergency is over. The emergency is over because it was handled before I got here. She looked up across the open chest and met Cora's eyes. You held his heart in your hand, and you kept him alive on a bridge you learned in a war. I have never seen it done better, and I did not do it. Say it back to me, so I know you hear it. You saved this boy. Cora Bishop stood there with her arms red to the elbow and the boy's blood on her face shield, and she did not say it back. She looked down at the heart still beating in the open chest, at the crude field bridge that had held at her own hands that hadn't shaken once when it mattered, even though they were shaking now. And when she finally spoke, it was not to Raman, and it was not to the room. I told you, she said very quietly, and no one but her knew she was speaking to a man 5 years dead. I do not let them die when I can help it. I told you that was the whole of it. Then the team was moving the gurney rolling toward the doors, the boy going up to the light of an operating room to be finished and closed, and Cora stepped back from the table at last and put a hand out and caught the edge of the counter, because now that the crisis was over, her knees had finally remembered to be afraid. Across the emptying bay, General Marcus Whitlock stood alone by the rail, where his son had been looking at the blood on the floor, and the woman leaning on the counter, and on his face was the look of a man whose entire understanding of 5 years of his own life had just come apart in front of him. They found each other an hour later in the surgical waiting area on the 4th floor, where the storm pressed white and silent against the tall windows, and the only light was the low glow of the fixtures the night shift left on. The general was sitting alone on a vinyl bench, still in his coat, the 4 stars catching the light and meaning nothing at all up here. He heard her step and looked up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was enormous after the screaming of the bay. Dr. Raman says he is going to make it, Cora said, leaning against the wall across from him. She had changed into clean scrubs, but she had missed a line of dried blood at her wrist, and her sleeve had ridden up, and the old burn scar showed plain now, and she did not bother to cover it. The repair held. They plated 3 ribs and washed out the chest. He will need a long recovery, and his ranger days are almost certainly finished. But he will live. He will get old. He will have children if he wants them. Marcus let a breath out of himself that seemed to take a piece of his chest with it. I tried to destroy you, he said. You know that. I pushed for the court-martial. I killed your decoration in committee. I made sure a shadow followed your name to every posting until you gave up and left. And tonight, You opened my son's chest with your hands and kept his heart beating on a trick you learned in the war I blamed you for." He shook his head slowly. "Why? Why would you do that for me?" "I didn't do it for you," Cora said. There was no cruelty in it, just exhaustion and the plain shape of the truth. "I did it because there was a patient on my table with a heartbeat, and that is the whole of the oath. It does not have a clause about whether I like his father." Marcus was quiet. Then, because he had carried it for 5 years and could not carry it one more night, he said, "Why did you let Duke die?" Cora closed her eyes. "I have gone over it 10,000 times, Marcus said, and his voice was breaking apart. "You had blood. You had your hands. He was the best man I ever knew. And you turned your back on him for a tent full of privates whose names you never even learned. I need to understand it. I have needed to understand it for 5 years." Cora opened her eyes. She reached into the pocket of her scrub top and drew out the small, heavy thing she had carried against her heart for 5 years, and she held it out to him on her open palm. It was a challenge. Coin brass gone black on one side, where the fire had licked it, the unit crest still just readable through the scorch. Marcus's breath stopped in his throat. He knew that coin. He had one exactly like it in a drawer at home. It was Duke's, because I did not make the choice. "General," Cora said quietly. "Duke did." Marcus reached out and took the coin, and it was cold, and it seemed to burn him anyway. "What bond?" he said. "The report you read was cleaned up before it ever reached you," Cora said. "The Army did not want the story that a base command structure came apart in the first 10 minutes of a fuel fire, so they smoothed it. They needed the triage nurse to have made a hard, cold decision under protocol, and I let them write it that way because the truth was worse for everybody who loved him and better for nobody." She pushed off the wall and came a step closer. "Do you want the truth? The real one? Not the folder." "Tell me," Marcus whispered. "When they brought Duke in, his belly was open, and he was burned down one whole side. And I knew the way you know that with what I had in that tent, he was already gone. At the same second, they were dragging in those 6 young soldiers, and those boys I could save if I moved right then, and did not stop. 3 units of blood, 1 pair of hands. That was the whole math of it." Her voice, so flat all night, had begun at last to shake. "I was going to work on Duke anyway. He was a master sergeant. He was your brother protocol, and my own heart both said he was the priority. I had my hands on him. And then he woke up." Marcus made a sound. "He grabbed my wrist," Cora said. "Hard enough to bruise the bone. He was a Special Forces medic general. He had run triage himself 100 times. He took one look at those 6 boys screaming on the cots and one look at his own belly, and he did the same math I had just done, and he came to the same answer, only faster, because it was his own life on the scale. And that made it simple for him in a way it could never be for me." She swallowed. "That is a direct order, Lieutenant. You give that blood to my kids. You fix my boys. You let me go." And I said no. I told him I had to try to save him. And he gripped my wrist harder, and he said, "If you waste this blood on a dead man, Kestrel, I will find you in the next life, and I will make you sorry. Do your job. Save the young ones." Tears were running openly down the general's face now, and he did not lift a hand to stop them. "So I followed my orders," Cora said. "I gave the blood to the 6 boys, and I brought them back one at a time. And while I did it, I sat where I could reach him with one hand, and I held on to him, and I was holding his hand when he went. And before he went, he took that coin out of his pocket, and he pressed it into my fingers. And he told me to keep it until I met a Whitlock who was ready to hear the truth. He said, 'My brother is going to blame you, and you are going to let him because he needs somewhere to put it. Give him the coin when he is done being angry. He will understand what it means." Marcus Whitlock folded forward on the bench with the coin pressed to his mouth and wept the deep broken weeping of a hard man who has spent 5 years hating the one person who had honored his brother's last order, who had taken the blame so that Duke could stay a man who died of his wounds, instead of a man who was ordered abandoned in a report who had carried the coin against her heart through 5 years of exile, because a dying medic had asked her to. And she did not break promises to the dying. "He asked me to take the weight," Cora said softly, "so his family would get their folded flag with no questions attached to it. I could carry it. I had already left the army in every way that counted. So I let you hate me. It was the last thing he asked me to do for him, and I do not let people down when I can help it. I think I already told you that tonight, downstairs with my hand inside your son." The doors opened. Priya Raman came in still in scrubs, pulling off her cap exhausted and lit up with the particular triumph of a save. "Eli is out," she said. "He is in the ICU. His numbers are rock solid. In a few hours when he wakes up, you can see him." She looked between the two of them, felt the weight in the room, and had the grace to step back toward the door. "I will give you a minute." Marcus stood. He was unsteady on his feet. He looked at the coin in his hand, and at the burn scar on Cora's wrist, and at the woman herself, and then Marcus Whitlock did a thing that no one under his command had ever seen him do. He came to attention, snapped his heels together, and raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute to a civilian nurse in a hospital hallway. "Thank you, Lieutenant," he said, using the rank the army had taken from her. "For my son, and for my brother. I have owed you a debt for 5 years that I spent trying to make you pay instead. I do not know how to begin to settle it." Cora did not salute back. She was not a soldier anymore, and she had made her peace with that a long time ago. But she reached out and closed his fingers gently around the coin. "Keep that," she said. "It was always yours. I was just holding it until you were ready." She almost smiled. "Go be with your son, General. He has a long road, and he is going to want his father at the top of it, not the Admiral. Just the father." 3 days later, the fight moved to a room with no blood in it at all. The disciplinary hearing was held in the hospital's executive boardroom, 40 floors of Denver, spread out white and clean beyond the glass, and the air up there smelled of coffee and fear instead of iodine. Cora sat at the end of a long table in a plain gray suit, with her hands folded her license and her livelihood balanced on the edge of a knife. Across from her sat the chief medical officer, Dr. Gerald Ostrander, a man who had not touched a patient in 15 years and who saw medicine entirely through the lens of exposure and premiums, flanked by 2 hospital attorneys and a stone-faced representative from the state nursing board. "Miss Bishop." Ostrander began adjusting his glasses. "No one disputes that Tuesday's outcome was fortunate, but we cannot allow outcome to launder process. You performed a resuscitative thoracotomy. You opened a living man's chest, spread his ribs, and manipulated his heart with your hands. You are a registered nurse. The liability you have exposed this institution to is frankly staggering, and the board's recommendation is termination effective today, and referral to the state for permanent revocation of your license." "I authorized the procedure," Priya Raman said sharply from Cora's side. "On my license, on a recorded line with the patient in traumatic arrest, and myself trapped behind an avalanche. She acted as my hands under my direction. There was no other way for that boy to be alive right now. A phone call does not deputize a nurse to perform open chest surgery. Dr. Raman," Ostrander snapped. "If this reaches the press, or if the family sues for battery, we are indefensible." "I saved a life," Cora said, level and unafraid, meeting the man's eyes. "I would do it again in exactly the same order. My duty is to the patient bleeding on my table not to your premiums. That cowboy attitude may have played in the Army, Ostrander said coldly. But here we have. The boardroom doors opened. General Marcus Whitlock walked in, wearing his dress uniform, the ribbons a wall of color across his chest, and behind him came 2 Army officers in the black and white of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, each carrying a sealed case. He did not ask to be admitted. He simply took the room the way he had once taken ground. Ostrander scrambled up, his face draining. "General Whitlock, sir, this is a closed—" "Sit down," Marcus said, and Ostrander sat as though his strings had been cut. Marcus walked the length of the table and stopped behind Cora's chair, and he laid one hand on the back of it, and he did not look at her. He looked at the administrators. "Let me be perfectly clear to every person in this room," he said, in a voice that had commanded divisions. "There will be no lawsuit from my family. There will be no leak to the press. And if anyone at this institution touches a single day of Cora Bishop's career, the United States Army will make it our full-time work to see that this hospital loses every federal research grant, every Veterans Affairs partnership, and every defense contract it currently holds. I've already had the conversations. I can pull the first thread by Friday. Do the arithmetic on that, Dr. Ostrander, and tell me if your premiums survive it." Ostrander's mouth opened and closed and made no sound. "Furthermore," Marcus said, and the JAG officers stepped forward and set a heavy sealed folder on the table. "I have spent the last 3 days in Washington reopening a classified after-action review from a forward operating base in Helmand Province 5 years ago. The record has been corrected. Lieutenant Cora Bishop's resignation has been reclassified as an honorable discharge with full distinction. The reprimand I engineered into her file has been expunged as based on falsified findings. And the decoration I personally buried has been reinstated and upgraded." He looked down at Cora for the first time, and his eyes were bright. "The Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism under conditions no textbook prepares a person for. She is not a liability, Dr. Ostrander. She is one of the bravest soldiers this country ever failed to thank." The silence in the boardroom was total. Marcus let it sit. Then a grim, tired satisfaction touched the corner of his mouth. "I believe that concludes your hearing." He glanced at Cora. "You have a shift starting soon, Lieutenant. I would not keep the floor waiting." 4 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday, the doors of Trauma 1 hissed open, and Cora looked up from her charting bracing for the next broken body the night would bring. Instead, a young man stood there, leaning on a cane, thinner than he should be, but with his color back, and a hard-won scar riding under his shirt, where a nurse had once held his heart in her hand. Eli Whitlock. And behind him, out of uniform for once, in a plain coat with snow melting on his shoulders, stood his father, no longer an admiral of anything, just a grateful man in a doorway. They did not say much. There was not much that needed saying. Eli shook her hand and could not finish his sentence, and Cora let him off the hook the way she let everyone off the hook, and Marcus set something small and heavy on the counter beside her charts before he left. It was the coin, the scorched brass one, the crest just readable through the burn. "He would have wanted you to keep it after all," Marcus said. "You are the one who carried it when it was heavy. He would have wanted the coin to stay with the one who does not let people down." Then they were gone back out into the snow, and Cora stood for a moment with the coin cool in her palm and the ghosts of a burning tent finally quiet. She slipped it into her breast pocket over her heart, where it had always ridden, picked up her stethoscope, and turned back to the monitors. Because somewhere out in the storm, a siren was already rising, and there was always another table, always another heartbeat, always another impossible night, waiting under the bright and sterile lights. And Cora Bishop was exactly where she belonged. From a burning firebase, half a world away to the storm-lashed floor of a mountain trauma bay, Cora Bishop proved that the past does not get to decide who we become, and that the truest kind of courage is the kind that carries another person's honor in silence for years and asks for nothing in return. She broke every rule in the book to keep a stranger's heart beating, and she did it because a heartbeat was reason enough. If this story moved, you take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes that quiet heroes deserve to be seen, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, sacrifice, and the people who run toward the fire. And tell me in the comments below, if you had been the one standing over that open chest with everything to lose and a life in your hands, would you have picked up the blade?